Thank you all for coming tonight. It's a pleasure to be speaking again about school avoidance. Before we get started, I just wanted to read a quick overview of our practice. MedPsych Associates, we are a behavioral health practice based in North Jersey with offices in Ramsey, Old Tappan, and Montclair. We offer both in-office and virtual services in psychiatry, psychotherapy, neuropsychological testing, autism, and ADHD diagnostics. MedPsych has particular expertise in child, adolescent, and young adult populations, the majority of who we serve. We work with many clients in the public and private schools all across New Jersey. Our presentation this evening will be approximately 60 minutes or slightly longer. Everyone in attendance will be on mute, but please feel free to write in the comments or chat section as we will be able to see them and we'll be monitoring them throughout the session. At the conclusion of today's presentation, we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have and we'll do our best to get to all of them. So I will be your host for this evening. My name is Nicole Clark. I am a licensed social worker. I work primarily with children through young adult age and have been doing a lot of work with mood disorders, eating disorders, trauma, and grief. I do work at the practice part-time because my day job is actually a school social worker at a district within Bergen County. And that's where I do a majority of my school avoidance work. And I'm happy to share a little bit of my expertise and experiences tonight with you all. So like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat section throughout. However, there will be a question and answer period at the end where I'm hopeful to get through a majority of your questions if we have the time to do so. So to get started, I found this article a few months ago in Forbes magazine, and it poses the question of today's youth and today's generation of if we are hopeless or hopeful. In a slide, you'll see that I'm going to go into a bit of what makes today's youth so anxious, so much more anxious than what we've seen in previous generations. But this article is more so detailing this idea of them being hopeless or hopeful, right? So what it kind of what it's kind of detailing is there's so much going on in the world that today's youth are exposed to. And with social media, they have access to this information 24/7. So it makes it very easy for them to get over involved in a lot of worldly events. And not even worldly events, but they're able to recognize what's going on in other towns, what's going on with other people, this constant sharing of information. A lot of people are asking, is this beneficial or detrimental to our kids? And that's why a lot of today's youth get a bad rep, that they are just this hopeless generation. What I see on my end is actually a lot of hope. While they are experiencing an increased amount of anxiety, depression that we may not have seen before, this generation, I think, are the first to really get themselves into therapy. They are the first to recognize that just because this is something that has been passed down from generation to generation in their family doesn't mean that it is okay. And they're doing a lot of work to make active changes in their lives and in society. So I'm hoping today, as we talk about them as our main example population, we learn how we can be more supportive through them in this journey of adolescence and young adulthood, and even early childhood, and see, what exactly is making them so anxious, is making them so depressed, and how can we help them navigate life in a much more appropriate and beneficial way. So like I said, the major question I get all the time are, why are today's kids so anxious, or why are today's kids so depressed, right? And this picture here is more so just depicting that there are levels and systems in our society that could be causing a lot of stress, anxiety, grief, loss, etc. in today's youth, right? So personally, we all have something going on at home. We all have something going on in our families. There could be a lot of stress for kids when they enter home at the end of the day. There could be something going on with their parents. We see a lot of kids facing parents with divorce or just parents that are fighting. Maybe they see a sibling who is struggling. That inner circle also extends to like their friends, things that are going on in school, like tests, quizzes, um, copious amounts of homework. We see today's youth are thinking very heavily into their futures. That fear of the unknown is super present. And then, like I kind of said before, there's a lot of worldly events going on that make the real life that we all know and talk about and prepare them for a lot more scarier than I think, you know, someone like my generation or previous generations had growing up. So you have to understand, and one of the most common things in social work school that I learned when I was in graduate school was this saying that we always want to meet our clients where we're at. So I'm depicting that to you today. You want to meet your child where your child is at in life. As adults, we have the beauty of hindsight to kind of look back at school and look back at our, whether it be high school, whether it be secondary education, we're able to look back at it and say, that wasn't as bad as we thought it was in the moment, right? We have bigger and more stressful events that we are able to compare high school to in life. High schoolers or even younger children don't have that benefit yet. To them, school is everything. It's all that they've known. They have been in this system for all of their lives. So it feels much grander than it would be to us. So it's more so we're doing more than just placing ourselves in their shoes. You kind of have to get down to their level and try and understand and see their perspective and how they view things. And if we're able to meet them where we're at, we're able to show a lot more compassion. We're able to show a lot more validation, and we're able to tell them, I know this is scary. Let's figure out a way that we can work together to fix it, rather than just saying, you're going to be fine. There are worse things coming your way in life. So today's presentation, I think, is really focusing on the fact that we have to imagine ourselves back in high school, and we have to understand that the stressors that they are facing in life feel like the entire world is crashing, whereas, you know, and kind of take our own opinions out of it in order to really understand where they're coming from. So I'm going to give you a few case examples. If you were part of the first presentation where I spoke about this, you may be familiar with this story. Kelly is an 18-year-old female of Korean descent. I refer to Kelly as one of my success stories. She's a current senior in high school. However, I met her last year when she was a junior, at the height of her panic and at the height of her mental health crisis. So in her junior year, she started to experience pretty frequent panic attacks. Those panic attacks would bring out a bout of psychosomatic symptoms such as nausea and stomach ache. She developed this fear of being sick, and that would prevent her from coming to school. So I remember one morning, it was during state testing, someone had gotten sick in the middle of the classroom, and it had completely thrown her off. She freaked out. She had to go to the nurse's office. She wasn't able to test for the rest of the day. She was sitting in my office, and it was just this constant fear that because this student in her classroom threw up, she thought she was going to take on similar symptoms and get sick herself. So this fear of getting sick was becoming quite debilitating, because she never wanted to come to school in fear that she would catch whatever sickness was going around that day. So by the time I had gotten to her, by the time she was brought to my attention, she had accumulated about 23 unexcused absences. We were able to help the family get linked to therapeutic services. And that's when she was diagnosed with OCD. So once we had that diagnosis, we were really better to understand why something so simple as someone coughing next to her would cause her to freak out in such a way where she needed people to help her decrease that panic. So we got her set up with the 504 plan. And basically, through use of her 504 plan, we made a lot of accommodations to try and make the school a bit less threatening. We moved her gym and study hall periods to first and second period. That way, if she was late to school, she wouldn't miss content heavy classes, right? It kind of gave her a little bit of leeway in a sense of she could at least get to school by third period and she wouldn't have missed much in her day. And that extra space in the morning was really beneficial to just give her the time she needed to go through her routines and get herself to a more stable point where she felt more welcome coming to school. We worked with her teachers. We had modified assignments, and we also exempt her from any unnecessary assignments that didn't really add to her learning. So by modified assignments, a math class, if she had to do questions 1 through 10, we had our teacher modify it through 1 through 5. That way she had a little bit less on her plate and she was able to take that focus on her mental health and prioritize her mental health. Again, she would meet with me about once a week. And I saw that over time, as she felt like the school was being a more supportive system, she was actually coming to my office less and less, and I was actually calling her down instead of her seeking the attention from me. Now that she is a senior, she's been coming to school on time every day so far this year. She's had no panic attacks in school, and every time I meet with her, she's just dealing with the regular stress that any college senior would be facing right now. So like I said, through a mix of therapy and the correct accommodations at school, everyone was really able to work together to get her to a more comfortable spot where the avoidance wasn't so heavy and she felt more welcomed and supported in the school community. Gino, on the other hand, is a current 9th grade student of mine. So this is kind of a work in progress for me. Like I said, he is a freshman year. He's a freshman. He has a 504 plan, and he also has a twin brother who has an IEP. So the family is already kind of, since middle school, been working with guidance counselors and has been working with the child study team, because this is a problem that followed them into high school and has really, I think with the surplus amount of students in the high school in comparison to the middle school, has kind of thrown them off a lot of the coping skills that they would have used back in middle school. So for Gino, he's having a hard time connecting with peers his age. I quoted him, every time he walks into the bathroom, he is concerned that there's always somewhere in there vaping, right? That is a problem that a majority of high schools are facing today. And for Gino, that's something he doesn't like to see. It's something he doesn't want to be involved in. And because he feels like every kid that he runs into in his grade is involved in activities that he wouldn't participate in himself, he feels very isolated, and he's kind of only able to rely on his brother most of the time. He's also overwhelmed by classroom size, and he wants to be able to transfer to a private school. However, it's not an affordable option for the family at this time. So because high school is bringing on a brand new set of challenges that he didn't necessarily experience in the middle school, he's having a much more difficult time adjusting, and therefore has been coping through this adjustment with avoidance. So as of today, he has accumulated about 8 absences and 4 tardies so far this school year, which doesn't seem like a great number, like a big number. But if you look at it in its totality, basically he has 10 absences left until our school policy takes into effect where they would lose credit, right? So like I said, I'm working with Gino now. We're still figuring out what needs to be done, but you could see how the avoidance factor is not helping him in any way. It helps him feel safe momentarily, but it just makes his anxiety to come back to school the next day even greater than it was that morning. Similar to Kelly, though, in the previous experience, we are working with his family. We have scheduled a meeting to get his mom in so we could talk about him, his brother, and try and see what accommodations we could include in his 504 plan to make it more accessible and more comfortable for him to come to school. I'm also starting a social group at my school this year. And I'm hoping that, and we're asking for him and his brother to be part of that group to see if that will help them connect with people their age and in their grade that they wouldn't have necessarily connected with if they weren't in their classes. So while I don't have a definitive answer yet as to what is helping Gino and his brother come to school every day, that is the plan that we have set in place for now. And that constant communication between myself, our vice principal, his guidance counselor, and his mom, we're really trying to set these two up for success. And it is a slow build, right? These problems don't get fixed overnight, but we're making sure that the little things we do make the environment more comfortable for the two of them, and they feel like they can really look at the school as a comfortable place and evolve. So just to kind of, in terms of defining school avoidance, I thought it was really important to differentiate school avoidance from truancy. School avoidance usually occurs as a direct result of school and performance anxiety, right? So the avoidance is a safety behavior. It helps them cope with the anxious feelings because they don't have the emotional regulation skills, or they don't have the appropriate distress tolerance skills to deal with anxiety on its own. So they think the only available answer to them is to just not come to school. That is different from truancy. So truancy is a deliberate, what's the word I'm looking for? Truancy is like when you skip school, right? So like your parents come and drop you off at school and then you just never show up to class, right? We have a McDonald's next door to our high school, and we see so many kids hide in the McDonald's during the day instead of coming into school through the front doors at the beginning of the morning. So truancy is more deliberate and it's more sneaky, right? So if a child is experiencing school avoidance, that parent knows that the child is most likely at home. They don't want to leave their house that day. But if a child is experiencing truancy, that parent believes that they're at school, but the child left last minute or never made it through the front doors and is deliberately skipping class. So I feel like it's very important to distinguish that, because school avoidance is, like I said, a coping mechanism. They don't want this to be happening to them, but they feel like this is the only option and is the only way that they can deal with these emotions because they don't know anything else at that point. There are 4 main drivers of school avoidance. So basically 4 main reasons why kids feel like it is uncomfortable to come to school. So the first option is distressing things or situations at school. So that could look like someone who is avoiding missed homework, right? Someone who is avoiding a test, someone who is avoiding a presentation. Homework, presentations, exams give them so much anxiety that performance aspect becomes so debilitating that they feel unprepared to face it, and therefore they want to stay home. Now, of course, the more that you avoid the test, it doesn't just make it go away. It just means that you have to take the test or present on a different day. So that one day of missing school can quickly turn into multiple days the more and more your child becomes comfortable staying at home. A second main reason we commonly see are avoidance of social situations or other related performance situations. So that could be, like the cafeteria, right? I commonly see students who feel like they don't have a group of friends to sit with at the cafeteria. That could be a main reason why they don't want to come to school. They want to avoid that social aspect, right? I see that most commonly in girls, but in boys as well, just not as often. I think for girls, who you sit with at lunch can be a very strong social status or factor. And having to sit alone is a lot scarier than it might be for a boy sometimes, especially in high school. Other social situations could include bullying. So if the child is being bullied and maybe they haven't spoken out about it. They haven't told you as their parent, or they haven't told a teacher or safe person at the school. They're going to want to stay home. Bullying is a very common cause as to why kids want to avoid coming to school. They don't want to report the bullying to administration because I feel like that's only going to make it worse. So again, it's a much more safer option for them to just stay at home. 3, seeking attention from parents and caregivers. At the high school, this isn't one that I necessarily see most common. However, I think this pops up most often in middle schools or even elementary schools. I think any child who may be diagnosed with separation anxiety from the parent, a main reason why they wouldn't want to come to school is because they don't want to be separated from their mom or dad. And then 4, comfort and remaining at home. I think this reason is a pretty obvious one. Ever since COVID, when kids got used to staying at home and doing their homework virtually, or just doing their classroom or their classwork virtually, it made their natural habitats all the more natural, right? They know that it's possible to do work from home. They know that they don't need in-person instruction. They don't understand how going to school is more beneficial in the social abstract, or even how going to school gives you more attention from the teacher. And at home, again, it's that feeling of safety. They don't want to compromise that feeling of safety. They can be in their room. They can look however they want. They don't have to worry about people seeing them in a certain way. And so that is probably one of the most common factors that will keep kids at home and avoiding school from day to day. I keep saying that avoidance is a coping skill. So this graph just kind of depicts how anxiety, or the cycle of anxiety, works. This could be used for any negative emotion. So the kid, doesn't necessarily need to be feeling anxious. They could be feeling depressed. They could be feeling lonely. They could be feeling isolated, and they don't know how to deal with that emotion. So they engage in avoidant behaviors, right? Staying at home, or not confronting someone, right? Not telling administration if someone is picking on them. They don't want to avoid, they want to avoid the problem from getting worse. And so the only way they know how to do that is by staying in the comfort of their own home. Now, in the morning, when they have to wake up and they're fighting with their parents about going to school, the minute a parent allows them to stay home fills them with relief. They don't have to go to school for that day. However, we all know that relief is only temporary. By the time nighttime comes, it does nothing but add to long-term anxiety growth, because now they're even more anxious than they were that morning to go to school, because the more that you avoid, the more the anxiety grows and grows and grows on the child's shoulders, right? So think about it. If a child misses school, they miss a lot of schoolwork, and they could try their best to do that schoolwork at home, but with a lack of proper attention or proper instruction, they may not understand how to complete that homework on their own. So even though it felt great to stay home and get to sleep in maybe in the morning, the second that they start doing the work and understand that they can't figure out the content on their own, they start to feel more anxious. And the more and more work that starts to pile up on their plate, the more avoidant they're going to go to school, and they're not recognizing how more absences only creates more work for them, and therefore they're hurting themselves and not benefiting themselves in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so that is why avoidance is used as a coping factor, and that's why our main goal is to teach students more appropriate coping skills or distress tolerance skills to get them to manage that anxiety in a better and more appropriate way. What school avoidance can look like. So the more obvious factors are increased absences and increased tardies, right? The more that they stay home from school, the more obvious school avoidance can be. It also can look like if your child is struggling to make it through an entire day of school, that could be a sign that school anxiety is increasing with time. If they are showing increased anxiety and distress surrounding school and school related activities. So if you see that they're not participating in clubs that they used to enjoy, they're not going to football games or basketball games, they're not going to dances. There's a huge social aspect that is involved with school, obviously, as we discussed before, that they could be avoiding, and that can turn into something like increased absences along the way if it's not being properly handled. They could be experiencing trouble with sleep during the weeknights. So if they, the second that they go to bed at night, they're just thinking about waking up and going to school the next morning, and that could really cause some major disruptions. And then also increased class disruptions. We have a group of students at my school, we call them frequent flyers. They're a great group of kids, but they can't stay in class. And the second that something in class bothers them, they're asking to come to my office. They're asking to take a walk in the hallway. They're asking to go to the bathroom, or they're asking to go to guidance. So just like an inability to actually sit and stay in class for the remainder of the period can show signs that maybe some school-related anxiety is starting to form. Also, if you see that your child is experiencing intense anxiety throughout the week, and then it automatically goes away on the weekends, it could be a sign, an obvious sign that the anxiety is more so related to school than it is to any other social factor. I think one of the most common concerns that are then presented to me by parents is this, are we enabling or accommodating our child's behaviors by doing XYZ, or are we being supportive? I think parents are always asking, how do they help their child without doing everything for their child? And this is tricky, right? I think it always depends on the grade level and the intensity of the situation. We want to encourage our children to become more independent, but we know that at this stage of development and how anxiety is so present in their lives, it really alters the way that they are able to rationally think of their experiences in life. So if they are dealing with a pretty heavy diagnosis, or if they are dealing with something traumatic or really stressful that just happened in life, I think parents kind of have to show them, or be that person, that they be that model of behavior to show them how to get through these tough times in life. So if that means you are reaching out to teachers a bit more, or you're the one constantly calling the school in the beginning, I think you're showing them this is how we get things done, with the expectation that over time, as things start to get better, they'll be able to start sending their own emails to teachers to figure out what work they're missing, or they'll be able to get to, go to school on their own and go to guidance without you having to call ahead and tell them that they're having a bad day. So I always say that you want to have that conversation with your child. You want to see what exactly is their biggest struggle in life right now. You want to identify the problem of why they are experiencing such intense anxiety, and see how you can help them, how they want you to support them, model the behavior, and then over time, hopeful that things will become better and they start doing things on their own more and more. So a common example I always throw out to parents: if you recognize that your child is behind on work, and you are expecting your child to email their teacher to ask for extensions or to ask for clarity, and they just won't email the teacher, I always say, do it with them, right? Sit them down at the table, have them open up their Chromebooks or their laptops, have them open up their email accounts, and write the email with them. You can help them word the email. You can help them you just be that supportive figure along the way, so that they're doing the action themselves, but they're learning from you. Okay. And, I'm trying to think of other examples where something like that could work. If they are having an issue and you don't want to call the school ahead, you can kind of give the school a heads up, right? I always have parents who call me in the morning and they'll tell me like, my child didn't want me calling you, but this is going on. So if if they come to you, act like you don't know anything. I think that is, I'm always okay with that. I will act like I don't know anything. I'll have the child come to me on their own, but at least I know that the child is struggling, and I'll call them if I have to call them down myself. I'll just act like it was a random check-in, right? So it's making them more by you calling ahead of time, or you just prepping the school that something is going on and you want someone to check in with your child. You can kind of have the guidance counselor or whoever that you're speaking to mold the story a bit to make the child feel like they came to you on their own. And then they're filled with like this type of pride. And then if they are filled with pride and they had a positive reaction, that's going to make them more and more comfortable to seek out help in school more often on their own. So sometimes you just need to help them make that first initial step. And the more comfortable that they become in taking those steps, the more often you'll start to see them do it on their own. In terms of interventions and strategies, some of these are obviously going to be school-based, and some of these are ones that you can do on your own. So for starters, address concerns. Why is your child avoiding school? What is making them so anxious? And is this something beyond your control, right? I always bring up bullying because I feel like it's an easy example in this situation. But if your child is being bullied and they haven't told anyone yet, I feel like that's a very understanding reason as to why they're staying home. And you can make the appropriate calls to make the school know that this is happening, right? If the child feels unsafe, right? Do they feel trapped in school? Do they feel like they don't know the appropriate people to talk to in a time of crisis? We have a direct answer to a not so obvious question, and you are able to again contact the school, and maybe someone can set something up within the school environment to help with that fearful or unsafe feeling in them. So you want to make sure that they're not just avoiding school. You don't want to believe that they're avoiding school because they're lazy, and you don't want to believe that they're avoiding school because they're bad kids, or that they're trying to make your life more difficult. There's always an underlying cause, and you want to make sure that you're identifying it, validating it, and showing, and again, modeling that behavior and showing them how to ask for help. Verify absences. This is different from school to school. I can only tell you what we do on our end. We have verified and unverified absences. A verified absence is when the parent calls in the morning to confirm their child won't be there in attendance. The reason why this is so important is because teachers are only allowed students to make up work when the absence is verified. If the absence is unverified, we're just going to assume that they were cutting, or it is an act of truancy, and it can act negatively against them. So if you're able to communicate with the school that you're having a hard time getting them in the morning, that also helps the school understand that there is a deeper problem involved, and what kind of team do we have to create to get that child the help and support it needs to get into the school each and every morning. Discuss and review reintegration strategies. Reintegration strategies, I think you don't always need a 504 plan for reintegration strategies, and I'm going to go over a list of the ones we commonly use at my school. Most of the time, someone who is struggling with school avoidant behaviors does have a 504 plan developed, and I'll talk about that in a few slides. But some of the reintegration strategies that you could do without a 504 plan can include, if your child's having trouble coming to school, are they still able to go to clubs in the afternoon so they're able to practice socializing with peers their age? Maybe they need to take a tour of the school with a guidance counselor, right? So the guidance counselor, whoever's giving this tour, can point out the correct people to go to. The guidance counselor or whoever's giving the tour can show them where the nurse's office is, can make, show them where the principal's office is, just kind of pinpoint safe spots within the school environment that they can go to throughout the day if they are in crisis. Some of our guidance counselors will schedule meetings with kids after school hours. That way the child can come into the school and see the environment without the hallways packed with 100 million people. And that just helps them start to see the school as a less scary place. And the more and more they see the school without students in it, you can easily start adapting them into a normal full day routine. Some of the reintegration strategies that we use that are included as 504 accommodations include altering of schedules, like I said in the case example before with Kelly, moving classes around so that way they're not missing heavy content classes in the beginning of the day. For some kids who have extreme school avoidant behaviors, we'll try and see if we can at least get them in for half a day. So if they can't make it in by 5th period, but they're able to make it in at 6th period, have them come to school every day at 6th period and make it a goal where they come earlier each and every day afterwards. You know, I know at that point, the fear is that they're going to accumulate so many absences that it's going to negatively affect them. But schools should have a good idea in showing and knowing when a kid is trying. And if your kid is showing that they are willing to try, most schools are willing to waive attendance policies or make a special modifications to account for the struggles that they are going through at that time. Just because you make an accommodation or a modification does not mean that that is permanent. You could always take it away when the problem is no longer a problem. So we have had kids come in for half a day in the afternoon and slowly increase their time at school and increase the time or get them into school early and earlier each week, the more and more comfortable that they become and the less threatening that the school becomes at the same time. Other integration strategies could include, like I said before, modified assignments, getting exempt from unnecessary assignments, just lessen that workload. And overall, they feel a little bit more comfortable coming into the school environment each day because they know they don't have to make up 20 million missed assignments at one time. And then the most control that you can have in these situations is this last bullet point here, altering the home setting. Like I said, one of the main drivers is comfortability at home. So we always try and encourage parents to make the home environment less comfortable. This one's hard. And I know it's hard because I think this is the one that gets parents the most backlash. And we're going to go over that in a little bit. But what I mean by making the home environment less comfortable, if they're not going to come to school that day, don't let them sleep in all morning. Get them out of bed at a reasonable hour, get them out of bed probably at the same time that the school day would start, and sit them at the table, sit them in the kitchen, and have them go through their assignments in order of their classes, right? I'm not always a fan of taking phones away because phones can oftentimes be a child's only coping skill. But if they're going to be home for the entire day, I think in these scenarios, it can be safe to take the phones away so that they're able to use other coping skills within the home and not always rely solely on their phones, right? So if they are doing their work in the kitchen and they start to get anxious, what is another coping skill that they can turn to that doesn't necessarily have to be any sort of technology, right? It's, we want to work with them. We don't want to make them feel like they're constantly being punished for something they feel like they can't control. But you, at the same time, want to be that supportive figure. You don't want to accommodate the behavior. So sometimes taking these more drastic measures is very necessary. And you want to make sure that this uncomfortability is consistent. Okay. Even if you get backlash at first, the child's not actually mad at you. That anger is most likely going to be temporary and they'll calm down by the end of the day, or they're more so ashamed of themselves. They can see the anxiety that they are placing on their parents because they're home all day and they don't know what to do to help their kids in the best way possible. They don't want to cause trouble in your lives, but sometimes anxiety can become so debilitating that they don't know any other way to explain that. So they use anger instead. So that is why, kids know that no matter what they say to their moms or dads, they know that you are going to love them unconditionally at the end of the day, and you're going to love them even more the next day. Okay. So they kind of project their own shame, their own guilt onto you. And that's why you see so much backlash from children in these types of scenarios. So you want to make sure that you are standing your ground, that you're holding that boundary, that this is what the home setting is going to look like if you're not coming to school, and remain consistent. The consistency is key here because it's going to help them recognize that home is not the answer, or staying home more so is not the answer. Okay. And that you are doing this for their own benefit, not because you want to hurt them in any way. And then, like I keep reminding, there is always the classification route. So we have Section 504 plan versus child study team evaluations. Child study team evaluations are most commonly used for students who may be struggling in the classroom because of either a behavioral problem or maybe even a learning disability. Undiagnosed learning disabilities are another common reason why kids avoid school, is because they don't feel intelligent in their classes. And if that goes undiagnosed, it's like they feel like something is wrong with them. So if we're able to get them evaluated, we're able to pinpoint that there is something interfering with the way that they're learning in the classroom. We can get them the appropriate help they need and switch their classes around, so that way they can show that, like, we have supportive options in this building and we can meet them at their level. Whereas, beforehand, we had no idea they were even struggling through this to begin with. Section 504 plans are for students who don't necessarily have a learning disability. These are for kids who have more debilitating mental health diagnoses that are interfering with their schoolwork. So obviously, the most common ones that are used for 504 plans are extra time on tests or extra time on assignments. So if your child gets test anxiety because they never have enough time to complete all the questions in class, that is a concern that you could bring up to their guidance counselor. In order to get a Section 504 plan implemented, you just need documentation from either a doctor or your child's therapist. I've written a few letters for some of my own clients, whereas a child study team evaluation, it's a bit more of a lengthy process. I wish I could tell you the process, but I'm not part of my school's child study team, so I'm not the most familiar with it. I work more so with the 504 students. But if you call the school, they'd be more helpful than I would in explaining what a child study team evaluation entails. Most schools have intervention and referral services. So this is an INRS group. These students are kind of identified either by teachers or by, parent recommendations. A lot of our school avoidant kids get put into INRS first, and then we figure out. INRS is basically a group of people or a team of people at the school who meet with students once or twice a month and families to figure out what exactly is the problem that they're facing and what interventions can we put in place. Are there any interventions that we could do that don't result in a 504 or child study team evaluation? Is there something we have to do at home? Are there tips that we can give the parents to help their child come to school more often, et cetera, et cetera? Sometimes it's that middle ground between the teacher and student, especially for ninth graders who may be uncomfortable or intimidated going up to high school teachers now. So if the interventions that are identified in the beginning aren't working or aren't showing any progress, then the referral side will refer them to a Section 504 plan or to a child study team evaluation. And then obviously there are always going to be therapeutic interventions and higher levels of care. So if this problem is progressing, you're unable to handle it on your own, your school isn't providing, the school's doing everything they can, or maybe they're not doing much at all. What type of therapeutic interventions can we put in place? The most common ones that I use with more school avoidant clients are CBT and DBT practices. And then there are always options for higher levels of care, such as partial hospitalization programs, IOPs, basically anything that gives the child a more therapeutic like setting during the day. So that way they can address the problem quicker. And hopefully by the time they're done or graduated from this level of care, they're able to integrate into the school community a bit more successfully. So again, if you never know what the next step is, the first step is always contacting the school. And then schools are really good at referring a child to services within the community that will help put more supports in place. And again, the end goal is to make the child feel safer, more supported, and welcomed in the school environment through the work of a team and not just you as parents alone. So I know it can be shameful for some parents to admit that their child is struggling so harshly that they can't get into the school environment, but it's something that we see all the time. There's no judgment involved ever. So the schools want to be there to support not only your child, but you as the parents as well, and work as a team to get them to a more appropriate and beneficial spot in life for them. That is all I have for you in terms of a presentation today. So I'm going to open up the floor to any questions, and hopefully I can provide you with the best answers possible. There is a question option at either the top or bottom of your screen. As soon as you submit the question, I'll be able to see it on my end, and then we can have an open discussion about it. So feel free to input any questions if you do have them. And if you don't have any questions, that's all I have for you tonight. So if you want to stick around to just see if anyone has something they would like to be answered, feel free to stay on for the last few minutes. But if you have no further questions, you're welcome to continue on with your night. If anyone is curious to other frequently asked questions that I have gotten in past presentations, I remember last time someone asked, what if the school isn't doing enough on their end? I wanted to point you out to the fact that, as a student and as a family, your child does have rights. So if you feel like your child has a 504 plan and the accommodations aren't being followed by teachers or by the school, that is a legal document. And by not following those accommodations, the school can be held legally accountable. So there are education advocates available within counties and communities to help provide legal aid to families that feel like the schools aren't doing enough on their end to support their child. I wish I had specific ones off the top of my head, but if you have, I can't think of any at the current moment. My supervisor knows a bunch off the top of his head, but I can ask him. And if anyone wants to get in touch with MedPsych afterwards for those resources, I'd be able to provide them then. I did get a question I have a question for someone asking if the presentation is available after tonight to share. That is a yes. I believe it's being posted to, it's going to be shared in a link via email after the webinar is completed. So check your emails afterwards. You'll be able to access the PowerPoint from there, and you'll have the whole recorded presentation to share with whoever you think may be in need of this information. But thank you for asking that. That was a great question. And then if anyone was curious, I know I got asked this a few times at our last presentation. I do work in the Fort Lee School District. I work at the high school. So like I said, we see, there's a lot of academic pressures in the students in our school environment. So we see school avoidance a lot because of their inability to handle those pressures at times. That's just the high school, but this is something that we are experiencing in our middle and intermediate schools and even elementary schools as well. So it can happen to anyone at any age. Obviously, the earlier that you intervene and the earlier you are able to cut off these avoidant behaviors, the easier it's going to be for your child to adapt into the school at a faster and just more appropriate pace. Those are the more commonly asked questions I got from the last presentation. Again, if anyone else has a question for me, I'll be on for a few, for a couple more minutes, and we'll be happy to answer them. But if not, like I said, you guys are welcome to go. It was an honor to be speaking with you all tonight. I hope that you learned something and you're able to take away some valuable information. Again, if you have a question that happens to pop up into your head later on, feel free to reach out to our offices. They can put you in contact with me. I would love to speak with anyone at a more intimate level on this if you feel like that is more comfortable for you. Otherwise, you will, we can always offer your child therapeutic services as well. And just, like I said, that more intimate connection can give you a better idea of what we're able to provide you with. So like I said, look out for the email. It will have a link to today's recorded webinar. And you can have or send this information to anyone you feel like will be in need of it. But thank you all for your interest and your participation, and hopefully we'll see you in future events.